Hi, I'm Romina Massa, and this is Off on a Tangent, stories from the hidden side of the spectrum. Every episode starts with something that happened. Some stories are loud, some are quiet. All of them are mine. Most take place before I knew I was autistic, some after. This is episode 2, The Books I Read in the Shower. Um, Picture this 12-year-old kid, me, just being so cliche under the covers with a flashlight, reading comic books at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., completely insomniac, having zero idea that my sleep rhythm was already unlike any others human rhythms that I knew around me. And it still is my circadian rhythm. I sleep at the weirdest hours, and I couldn't sleep. So I would read in Germany when I was a little girl. And, it was cool. My parents understood. They really could see that it was a need. And I guess because I was reading and I wasn't, there wasn't that risk that there is today with this, with, screens and all that, they weren't so worried that I was wasting my time. Go go backwards a few years, and I'm 9, and I'm on top of a tree in Bolivia when we lived there. My dad was a diplomat, and we traveled a lot. And imagine me up on a tree eating plums from the tree and reading Little Women, imagining I'm Joe. That's what I did. And I would escape up there. And then in Lima as a teenager, I just I watch Netflix in the shower, well, from the shower, and today, and back then I would read comic books in German from Lima. It's a Spanish speaking country, and I had a pile of books that just looked so crusty because they would get, wet and then dry and wet and dry. And I had this little system to where, they would get hit by the water, but not quite. You had them against the wall, and then the shower is hitting your body, the water, and there's somewhat of a void between the wall and your body, and the books didn't get as wet. And then there's me as a young woman, 19, 18 years old, coming back from college, reading with headphones on, or as a young teen coming back from high school, reading with headphones on from the bus station, and my mom watching me arrive. Um, that's it's always been my happy place since I was a little girl, and it really does seem like it's been a hiding place for me as well. And I think reading is just the most special of my many special interests as an autistic person, because that is a symptom. It's something that defines us, the hyper focuses, the special interests, the special projects. And in many cases, with the ADHD folks like me, the unfinished projects, the started but never finished websites and passion projects and ideas. And yes, there's certainly a graveyard of them in my wake. But they help me regulate, they help me escape, and it's a way for me to feel like myself. So these intense interests, these are ways to move into myself. So reading is the biggest of them all. I have a tattoo on my arm. It says paper has more patience than people. And it's from Anne Frank, from her diary. And well, besides all of that subtext, it says so much about just the ability of a book and of a page not to judge, not to judge you, to give you freedom, to give you free space, to give you safety, to give you a safe space. And that's what books are for me. That's what writing is too. But that's, for the purposes of this episode, what books are and what these intense interests are for me. And even to this day, when I bought a house, I knew that I wanted it to have a pool. And I wanted it to have a pool, not so that I could swim in it, but so that I could float on it and read a book. which is my happy place. And so I think it's all about regulation. And I think it's all about belonging as an autistic person. And I think these obsessions, if you want to call them that, these intense interests, help me create safety, create structure, and create identity in a world where those things were missing around me because I felt so lost. And I think that's why these kind of idiosyncratic, or, fuck it, call them weird things about me show up from childhood, about the ways in which I read in order to escape, right? And so they did give me something that I couldn't get anywhere else. And that's, I think, something my parents understood and something my parents recognized from a very young age. And I never had a shortage of books. I never had a shortage of paper. I could always write, I could always read. That was always encouraged, both by my dad and by my mom. My mom loves to tell a story about how she got called into the classroom once by a teacher in Bolivia. I must have been 8, maybe 7. And the teacher, I was in trouble. And the teacher is telling my mom that I'm not paying attention in class, that I'm distracted, and that I got busted reading a pirate's book. And my mom was like, "What do you mean she's in trouble? She's reading a book. What's so bad about that?" And the teacher just said, "Well, she's not doing math. She's not doing history. She's not doing whatever the subject it is that she needs to do." And my mom said, "Well, but is she not doing it?" But that wasn't really the case, right? My mom knew to ask better questions, and I was doing it. I was finishing early. I I had hyperlexia, I had hyperfocus, I had intense focuses, I was intensely smart, and I was done. I was bored, and I was reading. And my mom didn't see anything wrong with that. And I thank her for that immensely, because I think this ability of mine to channel intense focus is something that continues to guide me and to drive me to this day as a professional woman. I like to say that my ability to hyper focus is a superpower, and it's true at work. I do not miss deadlines. I am either on time or early, and I do it well. I always over deliver. I always do exactly what was needed or much more. I never underperform, never under deliver, and it's really a rarity for me not to present a fully completed project fully on time or early, um, because I'm fast, because I can focus, because I can do 5 things at the same time, because I have the ability to use tools these days like AI, which I didn't have in the past, but I've always been fast. These are ways that I've been able to thrive. I can spot patterns where nobody else can, and that's made me a fantastic analyst. I see insights that nobody else notices in the data, and I'm able to deliver reports with really deep learnings and insights and next steps, because I uncover patterns, because I connect chaos, because I see things others don't in my ability to hyper focus. And I do call that my superpower, even though there have been times where that intensity, that ability to hyper, has been seen as extra. And I recognize that. And I think that's okay. I've tried to handle that the best I can. I know that there's a podcast episode coming about some feedback I once got that did mark me. But in general, I think I like to say, when I go on job interviews and stuff, I like to say that the best way to be right is to be backed up by data. And so I think the evidence speaks for itself. Current circumstances aside, with the corporate layoff that I went under, I was undiagnosed and employed successfully for 20 years in this country, which is a country full of sharks and a competitive country. And I went up the ranks, and I was in leadership, and I was in Fortune 500 companies. And I think all of those things are partly because of the superpowers that I have, and partly because I've earned it because of my hard work, of course. But I'm grateful for the way I'm different, and I'm grateful for the ways that I've been misunderstood, because the data speaks for itself, right? I've been good at what I do consistently my whole life. So I think in the end, it's okay to be perceived as a little bit weird if you can still be perceived as capable, which granted hasn't always happened in my life. There have been times where that's played against me, but in general, I just try to look at the positive in that, right? And and there's been people who've had my back. Like when my mom had my back with that teacher when I was a kid, right? And that teacher just didn't understand that I needed more stimulation and not less. So I just think that's just so interesting, and it all goes back to my hyper interests and my hyper focuses, and there's nothing I am more interested in than books. And so I reclaim them, right? And let's reframe. I am not obsessed. I'm not too intense. I'm I'm what I am. I am Romina. I am excited, and I love reading. I love books. And that's what this is. This is curiosity. This is hunger. I want more. And I want fiction, right? I want stories. I want made up stories. I don't want reality. I do live in a world where escapism is peace often for me, and joy. And I do have disruptive thoughts, and I do have trauma, and I live in a mind that never quiets and that's always busy. And so anything that allows me to pause and let my brain be quiet is joy. And books do that for me, especially a good story, especially a good novel or a good short story. So fiction, definitely for me. And what do I love? What are those stories that have marked me, that have made me? This episode doesn't exist without 100 Years of Solitude, right? That's the best novel ever written. I've read it in Spanish more than once. I've read the audiobook as well. I you know, think that audiobooks are the same as books, right? It's about consuming the story. Who cares if you're doing it with your eyes or with your ears? I have this awesome feature called Whisper Sync, where my Kindle books and my audiobooks connect. And so I can pick up my book, put it down, pick up my audiobook, press play, and have it start exactly where I left off in my book. And with that kind of technology, why wouldn't I read a book that I can have in my hand on the pool and in my ear while I drive with continuity? So when I say read, I'm talking about both formats. And here's to all audiobook listeners who get a lot of flack about not really reading. Sorry, that's total bullshit. But um, you know, parentheses aside, what other books have marked me? I did mention Anne Frank. World War II is a period in history that marked me. I lived in Germany. I went to high school in a German high school, and I think it's something that my grandfather was very interested in, and I think it's a hyper focus of mine. It's a hyper interest of mine, and so I've read Anne Frank's diary many times. I've read Mouse many times. I have Anne Frank's diary, and I have the graphic novel version, and I have Mouse um, complete works, and those are books that mean a lot to me. And then short stories. There's nothing like a good short story, and there's nothing like a Julio Cortázar short story. And that's there, it doesn't get any better than that for escaping, right? Magical realism, just the same as 100 Years of Solitude, is just the kind of story I like, that bends reality, that lets me move away from what is real, which is not always the same for me as it is for everybody else. And it lets me exist in different possibilities. And I just love that about fiction. And these are just stories that have been throughout my life. I grew up with Little Women as well. And honestly, I could spend this entire podcast just listing my favorites. So let's not. There have been other special interests, of course. I can say that I can't list how many domains I've bought with the hope that somebody one day is going to sell my greatest idea. I've also started several content projects that I never finished. I tried to launch the bipolarfeminist.com when my initial diagnosis was bipolar, before I knew I was autistic. And there was also a big passion project I had called Full Circle, which was a project centered around supporting the support circle and providing the support circle of someone with a mental health diagnosis with all the information and the mental resources they need to not only be able to be there for their diagnosed person, but also be there for themselves because of what it takes to be in someone's support system. And Full Circle was a wonderful project, and I did have some family members and friends involved in with that in me. And maybe one day I'll bring it back. I think it was a cool concept, but those do belong in the list of unfinished projects that came from hyper interests. But but why, right? What happens? What is it about being deep in it? It's, I think it goes back to that escape that I mentioned before. It goes back to that ability to quiet my brain, to silence my brain. And as you can tell, there isn't real silence, right? Like, there's not nothing. I can't even meditate. I can sound bath. I don't know that my brain has a setting of full nothingness, but I don't need that as long as I can have a setting that brings me peace. And storytelling does that. So I think when I am telling stories or being told stories, either in creating projects or in reading books, I am pausing on the rest that goes on with my brain every day. And I'm being able to exist in one thing only, and one thing I chose, one thing I enjoy, one thing that brings me joy. And I think that's what I enjoy about those moments of deep focus and of deep, um, yeah, deep focus. I think that's what happens when I'm deep in it. I feel that I'm flowing with myself. I feel more joy and I feel more grounded. I feel safer. I feel more comfortable. And I find some clarity, you know? So I guess that's why I do it. And that's why I won't stop. So if you're a reader like me, or a hyper focused anything like me, I say keep being intense. Keep being you. As long as we're not hurting anybody, I don't see why we can't spend 5 hours obsessing over the Hunger Games. I mean, heck, I minored in education and I did an entire class project on the full semester's curriculum on the Hunger Games. So why not have a hyper interest that also takes you forward in life? We're talking about my one of my most favorite book series ever, turned school project, turned great grade, turned bachelor's degree. So I say to whoever tells you you're too much, you're not too much. You're just tuned in. And just like that, we made it to the end of episode 2. So I will see you in the next one. Thank you for listening.